I would like to call the Bike and Ped Committee to order for Monday, January 12th, 2026. Roll call, please.
Kyle Jago.
Here.
Jessica Atkinson.
Here.
Dale Schmitz.
Here.
Mary Kardowski.
Here.
And then Kim Shannock, Michelle Brodowski, and Sue Krieger-Arski.
Oh,
There you go, see?
hi, Kim.
We got a huge quorum.
Hello. Nice to see all of you.
Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
of
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, please remember our men and women throughout the world in uniform. I have no changes to the agenda. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. Number 5, action on the minutes from December 15, 2025 meeting.
I'll motion to approve. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve those minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. Number 6, items for discussion and possible action. 6A, consider, discuss, act on the Bike and Ped Comprehensive Plan. It's been a long sought plan, Devin. Thank you so very, very much for everything that you've done with this plan. Rex, you also. What I wanted to do here, first of all, I'm chairing this meeting because Tracy Kuki resigned. So she's no longer on the board, so we didn't have a trustee to chair it, so I am chairing it. But I want to thank the Bike and Ped Committee because we're working on this next, 15, 20-year plan. And I just wanted to hand out the different things that have been done with the Bike and Ped Committee from 2017 to 2025. In my opinion, it's quite impressive. It's 9 miles of sidewalks or trails, which comes to 47,520 feet. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Wow, you're gonna be a number cruncher now?
I am not. Somebody else told me that.
Wait for her to tell me how many dollars. What was the budget?
Yeah,
There'll be more dollars.
Yeah, it is quite costly to put in sidewalk and trail, and especially when you have any issues that, come up when you're doing trails. So, yeah, it's been a great investment from the village. So we're working on our next plan, and I'm gonna move to right next to Rex, so my back is not to Kim. I'm sorry, Kim.
Where is Kim at?
Kim is visiting her son outside of Boulder, Colorado, and I'm in his condo bedroom because he is on a virtual meeting in the other room. So,
Maybe ski hill.
Okay. Okay, so Devin, we can start with what you've done with the commit, or with the plan for us.
Yes, so what you all have, and what's in the packet, and hopefully you had a good chance to look at it. So I have made the changes, the items that we talked about at the last meeting. I had updated all those things following the meeting, and then those should all be reflected in what you have here. And I think, I don't think there was anything really substantial. It's just adding some couple of additional words here and there to clarify things. So that is what we have here. And I don't really have, I guess, any additional comments on that. Otherwise, and Brian, I got your comments. Brian had a couple of just notes on some additional things needing to be shown on the map that we didn't get. So I'll work on that. I have just a couple of clarification questions for you.
Yeah, for sure.
After, just more on the mapping part.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you have detailed questions, well, I want to send them to you beforehand. I mean, we don't need to go through them one by one, just in respect of everybody's time.
Yeah.
But the bulk of it's just, I want to say clean up, but we have done some things that weren't shown. So, for instance, I'll use the example the South Point bike lane. those, they kind of terminate a little bit short of that, so it's just real little things here and there. That I felt would be worthwhile to make sure that we're having accounted for.
Yeah, so that would be, unless there's any other changes we need to make, those are just a couple of things that I need to touch up before having the final plan be ready for village.
So I looked at the maps, specifically, every one of them, and so my question is how late dated are the maps? Because I see things like, and I may have this wrong, but like on map 1, Sand Acres shows it as a sidewalk. And I don't know if this is a big deal.
Yep, no,
Well, I think
that's
that's-
actually one of the notes that I have. I just have update facilities that are greater than 6 feet, we consider those trails. So I have Sand Acres and Highland Ridge noted.
Okay, that was the other one I
Yeah,
found.
and
Highland Ridge.
so it's the things that are already shown just need to be switched. Is that correct? Okay.
Yep, yeah,
So
that's
that was
just,
one of my questions.
that's just, ultimately, they just need to be changed from blue to green.
Okay.
Will that happen then on the other maps as well? Because there's, like, you can go to, the other thing I didn't see is Ponderosa's got a sidewalk, isn't it? I don't see that appearing on there. That would be on, I had this based off my computer, but it would be, page 31, page 30, map 1, or just map 1, wherever that is.
Yep.
Over to backdrop.
Okay. And is that what, Brian, is that what you circled on?
Were we on map 1?
Yeah.
Ponderosa, yes, I think so. Let me verify that. I apologize. I don't have a map open, but I am
You know what?
getting one open here.
Where that would be.
So you're gonna be, let's see here. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same.
All right, so here's Carroll, it's the next road over. It would be from here,
Timber to backdrop.
Timber all the way up to that.
Okay, so is that the street just north of?
Correct,
Okay.
up Carroll.
Yeah. It's on that street, just because of the schools on that.
Okay.
street.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's
So it was more, I'm assuming when they built that, it was more of a direct route to get people from the western neighborhoods eastward towards Pioneer School
Okay.
on that street.
so sidewalk on.
Devin, you do have it shown. My circles are more,
Oh, okay.
that's probably not appropriate for this map, but it's just broken segments for things that we maybe should consider for proposed.
Uh-huh.
Which I know you have that on a future map, so disregard my circles that I have shown on map 1.
Okay, so those are more for future.
Correct.
things.
And
Okay.
I didn't realize that until I got later in the plan.
Okay, but you mark those on that
I hope so.
yeah, so that's missing on map 5 as well.
Yeah,
So if you do one, you can.
but yeah, and once I update it, then it'll just,
Oh, it does,
It
okay, that
pops
was, all right.
yeah, no, the underlying data is across all.
Across
so I
all
just need to do it one.
Okay.
And yeah, it looks like Brian, what you had mentioned is also shown.
Okay.
You have on,
It's showing on map 8.
so I'll get those.
Should actually be showing on 7. Because 8 is bike facilities, 7 is pedestrian facilities, so it should actually be shown on map 7, not 8 in this scope.
Okay. Yeah, but I think you have them on 7.
I do. I took everything. Yes, from that I had marked on map 1, and I did put it on map 7, that's what it's showing there.
And then One, oh, did you just circle and squiggle out on map 7 just east of Ridge Road?
Yeah, I thought it's unique and maybe there's a discussion prior to my time here, but we have Allied marked for proposed sidewalk. I don't know if the draw there is maybe the bowling alley to allow people to safely get to the bowling alley.
Allied was supposed to be, that was discussed, it was not to the bowling alley, it was to the hotel immediately south of the bowling alley. So that people staying at the hotel would get over to the Bellin Surgical Center if they had surgery scheduled that day, family members.
Yep.
So it's just a short distance, but we figured that there's probably people staying at that facility.
Yep.
That have surgery scheduled for family members or whatever the next day.
Yep.
And so that would allow the ability to get back and forth.
So Devin, maybe because right now we're showing that going well past Circle Drive. Maybe that needs to terminate a little sooner.
Okay.
I didn't know what the reasoning behind it was, Rex, so I appreciate the background on that, so.
Okay.
So that's what we talked about.
Yep, makes sense.
So where should I have that?
Let me give you a road name.
So we figured if they wanted someplace to eat, they could just walk across the parking lot and. Right?
So
Yeah, because that's what they're
so
gonna do
far-
anyways, they're not gonna go out and come back.
You probably could just do it at that next, crossroad, which is Centennial.
That first,
Crossroad
Yeah.
to the north,
okay,
that parallel block.
okay, and then just have that be the segment.
Because the other thing I noticed is we had stopped at the corner, there were a bunch of Packer fans waiting for the bus to pick them up. They're from the hotel, but they must pick them up at that corner there. So for free ride.
Oh, you know, actually, well, on the last home game, I went to Runaway Shoes and saw, it was like right before the game, and there were people standing in the parking lot waiting it looked like waiting for a ride.
So, you know, if we could at some point get that extended.
Okay, I will fix that. Yeah, I think,
That's the Country Inn and Suites, I think.
I have to zoom in for the
Pretty
three
sure,
days.
but I think that is.
Yep,
yeah, those were my, I guess, only questions for you, Brian. Otherwise, everything else, is straightforward, and the couple other things you just marked, I can double check on. I guess maybe the one other thing, let's see here. This for the group. Find it. Okay, so on page 72 of the packet. The second, so right above 6.3.2, the second to last bullet, Brian, you had kind of marked as a question. It's encourage the conversion of abandoned railroad bridges over the Fox River to multi-use path bridges. This will help provide additional links to surrounding communities. So I think this was in the previous plan, but I guess I just wanted to make sure. So it's the packet 72, yeah. So it'd be this.
Oh, on the top.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, thanks.
Just wanted to double check, I guess, with the group on that's.
yeah, the reason why I had noted that is, I know a while back, there was talks of having the Marina Trail continue to go north through the railroad property, but our most recent comp plan kind of does take that pedestrian facility and puts a sidewalk up Marina Lane and gets people out to Broadway. I think the thought process behind that is once you get to, the north side of the Railroad Museum, you really can't go anywhere from there. There's no pedestrian facilities and you get to residential backyards. So the actual comp plan that the village adopted does kind of push that pedestrian travel out to Broadway to allow the accommodations on Broadway. So the question that I have is, we're encouraging the conversion of the abandoned railroad bridge over the Fox River. There really isn't an abandoned railroad bridge there. The bridge that's there is used by the National Railroad Museum. So I just didn't know if it really was appropriate. But I could be misspeaking.
I know with that railroad bridge too, we talked about the trail going to connect behind the Railroad Museum. We cannot use that railroad bridge, as we would have to build a separate bridge because they use that for trains.
Yeah, that was all part of it. It would need to be a separate bridge.
Yeah.
And I think it also, and I don't know how long this is, what's the street immediately north of the Railroad Museum?
Those are,
So at one point, if I'm remembering right, I believe there was an open lot there. At one point, like,
I don't think there is anymore.
there isn't anymore.
No.
And so I don't know how viable that is now. That was the thought, and I think that happened like someone else bought the house or whatever was gonna happen, didn't happen. This is probably maybe you remember, this is probably 2007, 2008. I mean, it was early. It was early on. Reading this the way I take it, and this is just Rex's view, is it's not necessarily anything that we do. We're just encouraging Green Bay to do it so that there's more trail access. The grid expands, like from our trail into the Green Bay's trail. So it's not necessarily anything, at least the way I'm reading it, that the village would do, other than encourage Green Bay to turn that into a pedestrian thing, so then they could connect to the bike lane on Broadway, which would then scoot on down to the Ashwaubenon River Trail, and just make the whole bike system, pedestrian system more interconnected between municipalities. I mean, that's the way I'm guessing that's what the thought was. Whether or not does it need to be in there, I don't know if it needs to be in there.
Would it be better to change the word encourage to support? Or maybe that's just nitpicking.
I guess my first thought, as Rex was describing, that was saying something about support, or like support any efforts.
Yeah, for interconnectivity, and I think maybe that's what needs to be in there, because it makes it sound like we need to do something, where we're just supporting the interconnectivity of multiple.
If somebody else wants to do it, we'll go along with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if Green Bay wants to do the bridge, that, great, that way, then that bike lane that they would go to on Broadway connects to our trail and, and then eventually into the pier but, I don't know how far you want to stretch that.
part of my thought process was, I read it as an abandoned railroad bridge. It's like, well, there's an abandoned railroad bridge, we're just not using it. Well, there really isn't.
Right, yeah.
It's kind of like,
Oh,
it
no.
makes it seem like there's maybe some low-hanging fruit that we can quickly, easily address, but it's really not
If
that.
we put future. then-
Yeah, and I think in some of our other plans, or not our, but other plans I've worked on, I think the one especially is that one like by Alloway near the city of Green Bay, which is still being used, but that was one that in like Alloway's plans, I think it's like, if in the future this is abandoned, then pursue or look at creating a crossing there.
It's funny you should say that, because that's the first thing I thought when I read that. I'm like, this maybe came over from a different plan,
Yeah.
because obviously if you're putting a lot of them together, you're gonna be efficient.
Yeah,
Try
that
to
could be the case. But yeah, I guess that would be, I guess I would think if you were to leave it in there, maybe just specifying a little bit more about that. But I guess conversely too, if it's also kind of nebulous, I don't know, maybe.
Is there anything planned right now? Just saying, that encouraging multi-jurisdictional connectivity between trail systems. Because that really, to me, is what this talks about right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you need.
I think it's part of
specifically-
one of our goals, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you specifically need to call it the railroad bridge, because in and of itself, if they did that, it would help with the connectivity, which would go
General.
for anything.
Mhm.
So if that's in there somewhere else worded that way,
I thought there was.
Yeah,
then I don't know if you need that,
I'm looking
because it might cause confusion.
There's no question there, connectivity's under our goals, so we just have to find where.
Well, within the village, but is there something about multi-jurisdictional?
I see what you're
That's what
saying.
that's what this bullet point is talking
I'm gonna just change that bullet point to be that general. That way for sure it's there and it's written the way we're saying, and then you're eliminating the confusion of the railroad bridge piece. Because that's not the, like, people are gonna be stuck on that versus the goal of just being able to connect the communities.
Mhm.
It could be a catch-all for umpteen different
Exactly.
projects without having to list all those projects.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially given the fact that this plan is supposed to be for how many years?
Right.
Lots of things are constantly shifting. And then at least an umbrella is that.
So now that you brought that up, I had that as a question. So this plan,
Hold on.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, hold on,
well, I didn't know it was on.
I'm still reading.
Let's talk this one off.
It wasn't a question.
Sorry, I don't want to jump.
It wasn't a question, it's
Yeah.
whether we can put addendums to this in the future.
Oh, that's a good
I
question.
think you can,
That's a good question. Yeah.
I think you can amend this, Joel, correct? The comp plan, I think if we feel as though as something comes up after the fact, I mean, even our original plan had one, if not two amendments to it.
Yeah.
So as much as you'd love for this to be a
Right.
20-year document, you may have to amend it at year 7.
Yeah, and it shouldn't, I guess, it's a good point that you don't have to view it as like a static, it's in stone tablets kind of thing. You would just need to come back, I think, just go through this committee again and, work through that process, but.
Now that I changed your train of thought.
Yeah.
We'll go back to it.
Sorry. I really thought we had something that was specific about. Oh. Well, I guess, I don't know how much, so the second objective in goal 1,
Hey, John.
so that's on packet page 19. The established bike routes, functional north, south, east, west corridors, as well connections to surrounding communities. So it's not, I guess, super specific about working with others, but that would be, I think, I mean,
It says in established bike routes as well as surrounding communities. This includes improving connectivity to the east side of the Fox River, which is what the railroad
Yeah.
would do. I mean, I think that's a decent catch-all. So if we're going to use that, I would say that other one that specifically talks about the railroad grid.
Take it out.
I mean, I'm just an advisory person here. Can't vote or anything, but I don't know if we need that.
Well, otherwise, what I wrote here too for that bullet point on page 72 is just support the interconnectivity over the Fox River to multi-use path bridges for bikes and pedestrians. You can leave it in there and just change some words.
I think it's either or, because I'd be honest with you, I do want to use this as a reference going forward more seriously than we have in the past. However, the average public person is not gonna go in here and look and say,
Right.
oh my goodness, what are they talking about? So I'm either way. We can eliminate it, because it certainly addresses it in our objectives.
Kim, what's your thoughts? You've been awfully quiet over there in Colorado.
Well, I'm looking through just to follow up on what was being said, I'm looking through what the tasks are, because that's what we're talking about, right? Are we going to use this as a working document, or are we just going through the activity? So that's what I'm doing right now.
That's any other, well,
So I want to make a motion.
All motion to eliminate it.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to eliminate the third bullet point on page 72 of the plan packet. That starts with encourage the conversion of abandoned railroad bridges. Everybody understand the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Kim?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so anybody opposed to it? There's no nays because we all voted aye, so it's passed. We're eliminating that.
Okay.
bullet.
we will take that.
So just contextually, just for the record too, we're not saying that we don't want to encourage it.
Right.
Because we have that identified as an objective earlier in the plan. Right, we're just eliminating that bullet point because the strict application of that verbiage indicates we're taking some formal action to require the conversion of these railroad bridges. So we still support it. I just want to make sure that if anybody questions, well, why did you take that out? Why is that in the minutes? To remove that, do you not support that effort? I think the committee agrees that it still supports the conversion of these railroad bridges for multimodal purposes.
I think it says that on
Yeah.
the previous
I
page.
just wanted to make sure that the minutes kind of reflect that.
Okay,
So now, Dale, do you, still have that?
No, I think, well, no, I think they answered it.
Okay, okay.
Because we have amended the,
Okay,
after
that was your.
Rex said that, we have amended the past.
Okay.
Time. But that's important because we all know things are gonna change.
Right.
But that's why, I mean, I wrote a special note that I would like to use this as a reference because you guys are familiar with that. I'm not, but I looked at the demographics and I'm like, I would have never thought that 12% of us are 70 to 79. And I'm thinking of that demographics, and young people are more interested in biking and exercising, what have you. So as we leave this world, somebody's going to buy
Why do you
my
keep
house.
looking at me, Dale?
I'm just, but no, because I know that you're probably somewhat familiar with this because you did the other plan, but I wasn't. So I look at that, and then I look at the school system and the population, and I think to myself, if a lot of us pass on or leave, there's a lot of houses available for families, not just two people living in that house that are elderly. That I think the demographics are going to change considerably for bicycling and other activities in the village. And that's why I'd like to keep all of this in mind. Look, when I read this, and I went through page by page, just to read, and I'm going, wow, there's some eye-opening things in that first part that you put together, without a doubt. I was trying to figure out how can we have, what was the one that really stuck out to me with the kids in school? Why 438 in preschool and kindergarten, we have 1,103 in fifth grade. That's double. Now, this is a couple of years back. But if that's the case, how does that bubble move forward, right? And that's just the kids. That's not the parents that may move in.
Well, are those school population numbers strictly residents or are those people in the school district?
Thought about that.
So I think those are school district numbers.
So those aren't necessarily, a lot of those aren't necessarily residents.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, one of the limits of the data was by school district.
I didn't know if you realized that, but I know that.
I know we have a lot of children coming in, yes, but I didn't know where the statistics came from.
Moving on.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of with Brian's comments and then that one specifically, that covered things that I was looking for specific feedback and information on. And then I guess at this point, really, if there are any other comments or anything else that, either I missed or needs an edit or something like that, that's, I guess, what I look for. Or if everyone's happy, then that works too.
My only question was on the winterscape for sidewalks. I don't necessarily foresee us putting covering over the sidewalk. People walk on the sidewalk.
Which page is that? Oh, gosh. Okay.
Yeah, it was part of a general.
Yeah.
I read
I'll
that.
find my yellow right here on page 27. Nope, yeah. The village should utilize aspects of winter city design to help overcome some of the climate challenges. It would be wonderful to be able to do that, but unfortunately budgets don't typically allow things like that to
Is that kind of like in Vegas where all the lights and stuff like that above? The old Vegas?
happen. So, but, I mean, we can leave it in there. It's just not
Highly unlikely,
necessarily
whatever happened. Right.
something that I think that is going to happen.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
One sidewalks covered by canopies or awning.
Well, and I think what that really probably is getting to more is kind of like in a downtown kind of context. So it's not like every building should have an awning, but where places are up against, if there's like buildings next to the sidewalk or something like that. And again, not saying that you have to, but those are some of the things that
Would say. Would it sound better to some people if we switched out the word utilize to consider? Utilize sounds like we should be doing it.
Yeah.
We're considering it. It means, does it make sense? Yes, no? Okay, maybe not.
I think that would make sense, especially given like our layout of a town versus something that's like a straight.
Well,
down
and
road.
another thing too, like with the solar orientation part, you can't change your street grid because that affects where buildings are and how things are too. So again, it's probably more of a, if it could be considered, then that makes sense.
I'm good with that change.
Yeah.
I think that would be appropriate. I think that would raise less of a red flag also with maybe a couple of the village board members. I don't know.
And for consider.
Maybe we have to have a motion to change. No, we don't.
Change it.
If you're in agreement, then. Okay.
I just hate to see somebody reading this plan and going, oh, they're gonna make us put canopies on their sidewalk.
I bring up a couple quick things on two correlated items. So if you pull up the map, which is in your packet at page 69, that's pedestrian facility options. Just want to touch on a couple key things here because I think it would provide clarity to staff ultimately, and then it gives, I think, transparency to the community as well if this map is accurate, reflective of kind of what the goals of this plan are, or consistency thereof. So one of the objectives of the plan talks about when an arterial or collector street is being considered for reconstruction, that we consider all options for mobile. So we look at sidewalks, we look at bicycle accommodations, so on and so forth. This map does not reflect that objective. Otherwise, we would have many more streets that would have dashed lines on it. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that there's an inconsistency and that may be very intentional, and I'm okay with that. However, there are streets that don't necessarily fit that written objective clearly. So one of those I'll just point out, and this is a carryover of our previous plan, Ori. Ori is not considered an arterial or collector. It's in a well-established neighborhood, and it's shown as a street that's going to have a future sidewalk installed. So,
I think, go ahead.
yeah, I just want to point that out, that there's to some degree a contradiction there then. Is Ori an exception to that rule where we're saying adamantly that that's going to be a street that's going to have sidewalks? If it's not, we should take it out. Or we should identify it in some other fashion. And then just to jump on my soapbox just a little bit more again on this issue, when we look at the area around Carroll and Hanson and the connectivity of that subdivision to Packerland, we have a recommendation to put some crossings on Packerland that are going to connect to no other accommodation. And is that intentional? If it is, that's fine. I just want to point that out, that in the future, if people say, why didn't you put sidewalk here? Why are you putting sidewalk here? There's some transparency to it, and there's some clear direction to staff so that we know exactly what we need to be accommodating. Sorry, Kyle.
So I think the reference to Ori goes back to the planning of the Titletown district. And we discussed how are people going to get in and out of the Titletown district because we didn't know exactly what it was going to be. So we thought, well, let's just recommend the sidewalk in Ori. And you don't need a sidewalk in Ori with the current configuration of the Titletown district. So, but that's probably just left over from that.
You propose we just pull that, so that way, because then if is that the only one that's the inconsistency, or were there multiple?
Obviously, we talked already about outline a little bit, so I think we'll be there. But I think that's probably the only inconsistency. Now, I would say though that there are streets that are consistent with the objective, meaning it's an arterial or collector and it's identified with a dash line, but not everyone is identified with a dash line.
Right.
So what does that mean, right? What does that mean to staff? Is that a situation where we're looking to retrofit them those accommodations? Or are they just going to be left open-ended until a time comes where we reconstruct that road and now we're considering? It's just for clarity, I think for transparency, so, because residents will say, well, I'm getting sidewalks. You're saying I'm getting sidewalk, or Brian, Rex, and I all leave and Mary retires, and in 5 years, no one is here that created the plan. What does that mean on the map, and where do people go with it?
I'll be available to come back if it's something.
I have to say
In the
that
history
there
of the
will
plan.
when those potential sidewalks were suggested to be put in the plan, I got a lot of calls. I got a lot of calls from the people on Ori thinking that they were getting sidewalk. I said, no, we would never put sidewalk in without having neighborhood meetings. And I'll bet I got 15 calls from people about that. That was probably the most calls I ever got. Is when people were suggesting sidewalk on Ori, potentially, because we didn't know what was going to happen with the Titletown district. So that's what you got to kind of be careful of when we put things in, and then this becomes a public document and people see this, are they going to think that we're all of a sudden doing all of this?
All possible.
So I guess my thought or suggestion would be, this map would be reflective of streets where this committee and ultimately the board that adopts the plan is saying in the future when these roads are either reconstructed or maybe grant funding becomes available, they will be done. Right? Like we're not even going to consider it. These are roads that we're going to commit to, knowing that this map doesn't reflect all of the arterials and collectors where we may consider it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're saying, and I'm just throwing this out as an example, I'm not saying that this should be in the plan. This is just the example because it's on here now. Cormier, right? Cormier is the road that we talked about at great length. We have sidewalk on one side, we don't have it on the other. Are we eventually is the village gonna commit to saying that we're putting it on both sides? We just are. That's what we're doing. It's in the map. That's it. Or if it's just simply, well, we'll consider it, then I would take it out and just say, well, for arterial street for future consideration. And it doesn't show on the map. I think to me that adds a little bit more transparency because we're saying, yeah, we're doing these streets. This is a commitment. We don't necessarily know when, but we know as of the adoption date of this plan, these are roads we are definitely putting sidewalks in or pedestrian accommodations, and all the other arterials and collectors will take kind of consideration of the community. And that's just my thought. I think it adds some clarity to staff and they know exactly what they need to be focused on versus, well, does it get included? Does it not get included? Where do we go? I think it gives some clarity to the board too that we're gonna adopt. That's just my thought.
Agreed.
I think some of these things, like the sidewalk at Ori, were things we talked about, so we put them in so people could know we were considering them, and it was gonna be on paper. And to go back to Cormier, well, we talked more than just within this committee on that sidewalk in Cormier. My recollection is we did a study or did a survey or something about, is that a desire of the community? And I don't recall what the results were. I know there are probably mixed opinions as to what we should do with it.
So, based on that thought, the other thing you could do is you could take the arterial collector map, which we have, and it's a map in the plan. And you can put any areas that don't have current sidewalk or pedestrian accommodation. You can indicate all of those with dashed lines. But then in the plan, you make it very clear that these are areas for consideration. Not to your point, Jerry, yep, this isn't where it's gonna happen. But when these roads are scheduled for some type of reconstructive effort or maintenance, we're gonna consider it. And then that way, everybody's it's very transparent that we are going to consider it for that street, but there's no guarantee it's gonna happen or not.
That Cormier survey that they did, Kyle, people were for the sidewalks, but they did not want to have to pay for them or maintain them. But the majority of the people were for it.
In the neighborhood as well? I thought that's where we got the backlash.
On the southern side of Cormier, yeah, people were for it, but they do not want to have to pay for it or maintain them. So.
Because I don't have to shovel my sidewalk, so why should they?
Right, that's kind of the whole thing.
Kim has something.
Okay. We can't hear you,
We
Kim.
can't hear you.
Nope. Do you know sign language?
Right now, it's showing her as muted.
Yeah, right now you're muted. Now you're frozen. Maybe on her end. Yeah.
She's gonna call.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello, Kim.
Point I would like to make, I think looking at the action section, because that's what we're going to do, right? That's what we're committing to. So for example, when we're talking about all the sidewalks, oh my gosh, I'm hearing too much feedback. I look at number 9 on page 77. If my copy I'm looking at online is the
See, that's the problem. The copy online is different pages.
oh, it's not, okay.
Can you hear us now, Kim, better?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Other than through Mary's phone?
No.
No, yeah, just the phone.
Okay. I just want to understand the interconnectedness of what we're talking about and what we're committing to do in the plan. So in the action plan, under the section engineering action, we go down to number 9.
82 on
That may be
that.
three, that'd be number 9.
As far as I can tell in the action plan, that's what we say about sidewalks.
Evaluate demand. Go ahead, Kim.
I'm not talking.
Okay, it just says, evaluate demand for installation of sidewalks.
So are we committed to more than that? Because I hear it getting into the weeds about specific streets. And all we say here is we're gonna work with resident surveys to determine what we'll do. And now the feedback's annoying, so I'm gonna turn this on.
Okay, we lost you.
So
She
Kim,
said
Kim, I think can still hear us though, right? Just shake your head yes, I guess, but. So when you get back up to the top of the planning document, you get into goals and objectives. There are comments within the supporting objectives that we're going to evaluate for any street that's listed as an arterial or collector, we're going to consider accommodations for those types of streets. It doesn't mean you're going to put them in, but you're going to consider them. You don't necessarily talk about that outside of those types of streets, right? So there is a possibility that a local residential street, the residents on that street have a high desire to install sidewalk. Then we wouldn't necessarily consider it absent of that survey by the residents, right? Based on how the plan is written right now. However, we would consider accommodations on those arterial and collector streets, taking into account the feedback that we're getting from residents, as we always have. Ridge Road is a really good example. Cormier is a good example. Where we've taken that into account. But the idea is for both the village board, the elected body, and for staff to know what is the starting point for which we're going to consider these improvements. The ultimate decision rests with the board. The board is committed to getting feedback from its constituents before making a final decision, but at least we know from a planning standpoint, the whole point and purpose of this effort is this is our foundation that we're going to work from, and we have an idea of what direction we need to go forward with.
Okay. It's great clarification.
If that works for the group.
I think it does.
I think it just needs to be clear for us and for you and for the board and for the residents. So there's a degree of transparency to it too.
Kevin, what do you need?
Okay, so I think just going back to the map. So for Ori, does that get, well, I guess it's what stays on the map versus do things get added to a different map, or do I need to add language clarifying?
Would it make sense to switch it to, like you said, highlighting all those streets that would be under consideration and then just reclassifying it that way? Like, I feel like that would make the most amount of sense, because we're stating that we're gonna evaluate those two types of roads. I think laying that out on a map with the dotted lines that way would be a better visual for people to see, saying like, okay, everything that has a dotted line when it comes to will be evaluated at that time, than trying to call out them as different. Because otherwise, I feel like you either do all of them on there or none of them on there. Then either you're going to go to the verbiage of it and the map, or just the verbiage of it and then take the other ones off the map. To your point, otherwise it is confusing because it's like, what makes this different than your statement stating it's the arterial and
Are there
collector?
are there any ones that are specifically are there any ones on here that are specifically planned and will happen? Just more for my own clarification.
What page?
So the map 8 on page 69.
I don't think we have plans for sidewalks any more streets other than like new subdivisions. But
Brian, do we still have something planned on Hanson?
We have sidewalk plan on Hanson? We do. Yep. Between Viking Drive and
Leroy
on the south
Stretch.
side.
I call it Leroy Stretch.
Yeah.
I know that's planned.
Do we
So
have,
if you look at page 50 in your packet, that's the functional classification map. And obviously that map doesn't show where we have it existing or where we don't have it existing. But that map shows with those orange and green lines, what those arterials and collectors basically are throughout the community. Obviously there's some red arterials as well. Those are methanates predominantly, and then Oneida Street, which already has it, so that one's taken care of. But basically, any of those streets that are within the village jurisdiction that are green or orange would either have a solid line on it because it has an existing sidewalk, or it would have a dash line on it for possible future sidewalk for consideration. That's essentially what you would be doing if you were to stay consistent with the language under the goals and objectives.
Brian, do we have sidewalk plan for Morris from Holmgren to Ashland when we redo that?
It depends. So the old plan I think does, this new plan does not.
Okay.
I don't know if that's something that we have a desire for.
To that extent, and then I'm going to throw out what about Warband, because I don't think Warband's on there. Behind some of those developments to get to Mike Van Park. The back way entrance from that senior complex. I know we had talked about that, and I thought that was a goal, but not necessarily now. I don't think that's on the map.
you know, and maybe we have too many pages of too many maps in there. I like this map a lot. Because this seems to be a lot simpler than all those maps with just a few dash lines and green lines.
I guess what I might suggest, and at least what makes sense to me, is if, like for map 8, the dash one that's possible future sidewalk, it would just show for Hanson, and if there's another actual future one, future sidewalk, cut out the possible, and then I'll show the collectors or whatever the two are.
Yeah.
Show the collectors or minor arterial and collectors, and then just have like in parentheses or asterisks like to be considered, or sidewalks to be considered when being reconstructed or something to that effect. And so I don't know how that sounds or what you all think of that. But I guess that's kind of my thought of like how to maybe show that.
So this might be a dumb question, but when we're saying to be considered, because I like the idea of making it more blanketed, since that's more of the realistic way that that's going to be happening. Just so we know what to say as well. So when we say to be considered, who will be making that consideration? Is it strictly the board at that point?
I think based
And
on the
staff,
plan,
obviously.
and this body serves as an advisory body to the village board. So when these projects, let's say we were going to reconstruct Morris, which we are, in the next couple of years, when we put together the typical section for that segment of road that's going to get reconstructed, that gets presented to this committee. should this be considered at this time to install sidewalk, we're in the process of reconstruct. The committee comes up with a recommendation, and ultimately the board approves the cross-section. We do that typically between a very high-level conceptual design before the project even kicks off, up to like 30% design. Because once you get to 30% design, then our engineers, they need firm direction, because now we're preparing bid docs and specifications for the work.
Yeah, ultimately, like for Morris, for example, because that's slated for reconstruct next year. I mean, we'll see that likely in the next 5 to 6 months. That cross section, that proposed cross section.
This is from Holmgren to Ashland?
Correct.
So you're talking sidewalk with homes on both sides?
That's the conversation that'll need to be had. Is right now there's sidewalk on the south side until, is it Elmview? Is that the name of the street? There's a little street that drops down on Elmview, I think it is. So yeah, it's the conversation of, what cross section do we desire for that area? And, ultimately, I mean, as you guys are well aware, is anywhere where we put sidewalk in those residential areas, there will be considerable feedback from those residents. And we have to make sure that we have a common front amongst this committee and the village board, holding hands saying, this is what we're doing, based on feedback that we get from them.
This particular project, just as an example, this is a full reconstruct with full utility replacement. So curb, gutter, everything. It's not your typical mill pave like you typically see. A lot of street trees and things like that are within the right of way. Those are likely to be lost as a result of reconstruct, regardless of whether you're putting sidewalk.
Correct.
So regardless of sidewalk or not, it's a highly disruptive project to the neighborhood. So if you're going to do it,
That would be.
that's the time.
Yeah, that is something that, like Joel touched on it, it's not what our residents in Ashwaubenon are used to. Everybody's very used to our mill pave, our pavement preservation program, not the point where we're replacing full-blown utilities. The most recent time that you've seen that is when we did Morris out here between Oneida and Holmgren. Granted, there was some vacant lots there were some businesses, but the majority of those businesses did have access from secondary streets. So they didn't feel the true impact of, how impactful a project like that is. So.
I guess one of my thoughts is the village board has an overall responsibility for bike and ped and streets and signs and whatever. But the village board had decided, well, we should have a bike and ped committee to address those issues. And we have another committee to address these issues to advise us. And so I think that's kind of our purview, our sidewalks and streets. And so we should be part of that, part of that process. This committee should be part of that process.
So if we made it that all of these streets that are in yellow and green would be considered, the point of that would be the consideration would start here and then go to the village. Based on what we say, would then go to village board as our recommendation ultimately. And at least then everyone's clear on that process, that that's how that would flow. And then I think your maps would be cleaner, your statements would match your map. And then you'd have your dotted line for the ones that, like you said, are already confirmed happening. But then that way we all know what that process would be, that when one of these comes up to be redone, whether it's your standard or more of like what you're saying is happening on Morris, you guys would then bring someone from staff, I'm assuming, would make us aware to say, hey, this is what's happening.
Yep.
Consider what we would like to do here. Here are your options. Because also I would think we would want your feedback as to what realistic options are for that. Because when we're saying considerations, there's lots of different options for that as we, it's not always just sidewalks. It might be.
Right.
There may be other factors that play into that consideration. There's in this particular case on Morris, probably not, but there may be. Main Avenue is an area that comes to mind where you have significant environmental constraints, where you may not be able to put in the infrastructure that you desire because of those constraints or some of those other issues.
That's why I think it'd be helpful that you guys then, if you're bringing them to us as to like what's going to be done, you can then also paint the picture of all those things that we're not going to know outside of that. And then we can have that initial conversation here and at least get our stance on that. And then,
As long as we have enough lead time. I go back to Brian when you educated me on working with vendors when they're bidding. I don't know if you remember that when they did the street by the new apartment building here, and we
yes.
started talking about changing. I'm like, I would have never thought that in today's world, they may not bid again because you put them in a precarious situation, right? So that's why we need your input.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Ryan and I have both worked on projects collectively together sometimes in other communities where it's a full reconstruct, where typically what you're doing in that type, it's much different than mill pay because it is a highly disruptive project. We're having an initial project or introduction meeting to the neighborhood right before even we get to at the concept phase. That's kind of where we're having that conversation. So it's really important for staff to have direction from the elected body as to what their desire is, recognizing that the decision hasn't been fully made yet. But if we go into that conceptual meeting with the residents, we say, yeah, we're reconstructing it. That means we're tearing out all street, curb, gutter, base, water, sewer, storm, all that's coming out. Your street trees are likely to be lost. And oh, by the way, this street is a arterial or collector street according to our comprehensive and ped plan. It does show that for consideration of sidewalk. So the board is considering this. What are your thoughts? So we collect that feedback, and that's that survey point. Then from there, we get consent from the board saying, yeah, this is what we want to be included in the scope of this project. Let's just use it as the example, sidewalks included. Okay. Then Brian and the engineering staff go and they design up to 30% of the project. So we have a typical section or a cross section of the street, might have some conceptual drawings. We have another neighborhood meeting where we collect feedback. And oftentimes there we've identified where their driveways are, grade issues, where that sidewalk is in relation to the back of curb, street width, and all that. The residents come out and they tell us, well, that's not going to work because I have a boat and it's 30 feet long and I can't get up the ramp of my driveway. Mm-hmm. So at 30% now we're shifting things or things are coming out. So it's critical. These plans are really critically important for us as staff to know what that direction is so that we can survey and have conversations with the residents so that there's a solid footing. I think Brian mentioned that point of just, you have to commit to it so that we know, because if you go back and forth through that kind of initial phase of project planning, it gets really daunting and it creates an environment where there's less trust in from your residents because they don't know what to expect from you. You're kind of going back and forth.
So like on a project like that, Brian, how much time do you have between knowing that you're going to do that street, as serious as it is, to the time that it actually gets bid?
So
typically, I mean, I'm sure it's not exact.
Yeah, so you'll generally, like when Joel's touching on 30%, you'll want to have that at least about 6 months before you bid it. So you'll bid it in, say, February. We try to shoot for February.
Yep.
So late summer, at the very latest. Generally, we'd want it to be probably a little bit before then. You need to have a real good idea of the scope of what's going on. There, of course, will be a vetting process before that. But, you may decide that you want to put in sidewalks, 5-foot terrace, which is standard 5-foot sidewalk. And then you look down the line and that's where all the power poles are, or that's where all the electrical boxes are. And it's always this kind of give and take, pros and cons type of mentality. And as you guys are all well aware, is we never will be able to keep everyone happy. And that's the hardest part. Staff a lot of times will, I don't want to say take a beating, but there is some sort of lashing that, people they're not happy about it, but then just as much as they're not happy, their neighbor likes it because maybe they walk everywhere. So it's kind of balancing that act that, it's something that we'll have to work through.
So let's take an example, like, so we're in 2026. Do we know all of those roads that are going to be reconstructed in the village this year?
So for a full-blown reconstruct, the only road is Morris.
Okay.
Between Holmgren and Ashland.
Okay.
So we'll be working that's for 2027. So we'll do the design in 26.
Yep.
So that'll be our main focus, is just figuring out that scope and making sure that we get everything set up for that.
So typically, like if we have we, in this particular case, it's likely we don't need to acquire any right away is sufficient. It's fine. It's not a big issue. So figure about 12 months prior to actual start of construction, you really kind of focus on that. They've already done preliminary stuff, but let's say this summer, our engineering tech and survey crew go out and they start surveying data. It's generally right before that time that we're already having contact with the residents. Because as soon as we start putting in the request for survey work to be done, you got flags, stakes, everything going up, and everybody's like, what is going on? And if we haven't had that preliminary discussion with them saying, hey, your road is scheduled for reconstruction, and have that kind of conceptual kickoff conversation with them, we've already lost a little bit of ground in providing that transparent communication to the residents, and now they're starting to question what really is happening. And again, the idea is transparency, openness, direct communication, early, often, and consistently, so that the rumor mills don't start. They don't just start to generate legs. We have a firm direction that we want to go off of.
A number of years ago, there was a proposed sidewalk, and the sidewalk actually ended, and so it went nowhere. But we didn't even need to acquire right away, but we needed their permission to be able to restore their land that we kind of chewed up a little bit to get the sidewalk in. So we didn't need any of their land, just to restore their land. And I was told, we don't want your blank blank sidewalks. So the sidewalk ended and it went nowhere. So it was kind of scrapped at that point because it creates a lot of tension. Because when people get sidewalks, they don't realize how much of their yard that they actually will lose that is owned by the village right away. So it is kind of controversial. So anyway.
Especially here because we don't have one. So.
Right.
So where are we at for Devin's sake?
So we have to, just gonna make a map, right? Make a map with the possibility to be reconsidered.
Okay, so
So do you need us to determine which is which then,
yeah, I guess,
and then get it over to you?
so meaning just which things are definite versus take out and just, yeah. So I think that if you're all okay with what I had suggested about showing what's definite and then everything else out, showing the two functional classes that would be considered, and then adding some language. You know, I could add it on the map. I could also, I know like for map 8, you know, it's discussed on the previous page. You know, I could add it there. I don't know it's more important to have it on the map just so someone looks at it and they can see it. Either way is fine, but yeah, I think that's what, if you're all good with that, and then you want to show me or tell me what's definite.
So is that something that Brian and I give you, or Brian, or?
Yeah, I mean, as far as that part goes, just, yeah, between you two, if you can let me know on that, if it's planned. And, you know, if it's something too where you even want me to, you know, if there's like 2 things and one's in 27 and 28 or whatever, you know, if you want me to break it out that way, I can do it. If it's just.
Yeah, would it be agreeable, Devin, and maybe Brian and Rex can work with you on this? We could essentially have the one map that color codes the areas by functional classification. And then, because the Hanson, for example, is part of that functional class anyway, so that is included in that.
Mm-hmm.
But areas that, as an example, Morvan, are not part of the functional class, but that was one that we listed as for consideration. I'll bring up West Paulson and the connection to Babcock. That's not part of the functional class, but there's a connection there. Should we show that for future consideration? So maybe if you're agreeable, group, we can create the one map that shows all of them, and we can identify by color those that are arterials and collectors. So those are being considered just based on the nature of their street. and then a separate color for areas of concern or connectivity. So like Borevan is a connection between that residential development and the park. West Paulson is to try to get people to the trail. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Is that
Yeah.
agreeable?
Yeah, I like that.
It's nice and clean that way.
You have to read something that's good.
Yeah, so I guess you guys,
So yeah, maybe Devin, start with the map based on functional class, and then us internally can get all those kind of outside the functional class roads identified to Devin, and we can go.
yeah, I guess related to that, so that's
Right.
the pedestrian facility part. Do we need to do something similar for, now I know I'm
You're looking
confused.
for another map?
Well, no, it's like I have the two maps and they're both, I think I needed to change, I don't know which one's which. They're both map 8.
Okay.
So
Oh,
map 8 on page 74 is the bike
Yeah, bike.
one. Do I need to do something similar for that as well? Or do we need to do something similar to that, or?
there's a map, that's pedestrian facilities.
I think we just leave that.
I think the existing map now.
Yeah, because it has the different, I think we leave that.
Okay, so that, the bicycle one is good, it's just the pedestrian. Okay. That works.
Do we need a motion on any of that, or? You don't wanna-
I'm assuming we'll have that sooner than later comes.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I guess too, while we're on that, when do you need everything for, village board?
Morning of the 21st. So that gives us
You guys can just stay tonight and get that done.
7 days.
I was gonna say.
Wow.
Well, I mean,
Nine days.
I'd say it's already
the stuff
done.
is already there.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's,
This should,
we're not reinventing the wheel. It's just identifying what's already there and getting those. Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, we're gonna consider it, you know,
Yep.
breaking them apart and giving them done.
Yep.
That shouldn't take too long to do. We get together.
yeah, I don't,
Brian and I and
You talked about verbiage though, too, being on a separate sheet versus on the,
Yeah.
on that bottom part of the map.
mhm.
The verbiage would go on this, on that.
I would put it on the, yeah, because they're not gonna read the rest of this, but they're gonna see that map.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like the idea of that.
yeah, and there should be enough room that we can
Yeah, hopefully.
work that in. So, yeah, okay.
I kind of like the idea of showing our justification to why we're gonna do something, because these are arterial streets, so here's what we're thinking of changing. Rather than just changing streets because we don't know how many people are gonna go down Ori to get the title.
Sounds good. What else do you need? Okay.
So I think, well, I guess the other, yeah, is there anything else that you all have in your review of this, or are we, does that kind of take care of it?
I only had one other one, but we might have it someplace else. I have to find the page because this is different than the original. It was page 52 on the one that was sent to us, but it was in regards to training. And I didn't see anything, and I don't even know if we need to do that, but something in reference, like the village should educate drivers on sharing the road with the bicyclists, because this isn't just about bicyclists. This is the person that's alongside you that the bicyclist is concerned about in most cases, especially in some of our streets. But I don't know how you'd educate them. We have a hard time educating
I was
people
gonna
on
say, I don't-
bicycling and walking.
I don't feel that that's the responsibility of the government to educate drivers on.
Just follow the laws.
Bicycles, follow the
Yeah.
laws.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the biggest thing, I mean, bicycles are not just distracted driving. You know,
Right.
that's where a lot of these issues
Yeah.
lie.
Or drunk driving down in the.
Or
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we see
But
that.
unfortunately, as much as I'd like to think we could, it's nothing that we'll probably be able to fix as part of this committee.
Okay.
Because, you know, if you just look around and drive, especially when you get yourself in a commercial vehicle or you're sitting up higher, I would say 40% of all drivers have their phone in their hand.
Yep.
And they're looking at their phone, they're doing something else. So
Yeah.
you see it a ton, and it's unfortunate. I mean, you can be in an emergency vehicle blaring your horns, and these people are literally still on their phones. Whether they don't know, they don't care. It's just the new norm that I'd love to think that we could fix it, but there's something that is way outside of our abilities here, as talented as we are.
It doesn't take anything away from the education that we're trying to do in the schools, though, does it? Perfectly, got
No, so I guess, is there something I need to
No,
take out, or was it
No,
just
no,
your-
I think you had the part about the school education is in there. That's the important part of the students. Especially with the scooter stuff coming.
Education around entertainment.
Yeah.
Parents, grandparents, and guardians.
Yeah,
So you can clean up that environment, you let me know.
The only other thing that I had when I was looking at that I can remember is I had written on my notes from the last time because of like potential, I think it was like accidents,
Mhm.
was by Pilgrim and Cormier, right by like that, where you have the one for the possible improved crossings. We had identified that as a crossing.
Pilgrim.
Where Pilgrim and Cormier, like right by that was a potential because of the cars pulling out and then coming and crossing. We had more.
We have a potential crossing right across from Veterans Park.
Yeah, there's one on
Yeah.
that, but then on this, the side of Cormier and Pilgrim, because of the way the sidewalks were there, we had talked about that at the last meeting, so I put an X on it. That we were gonna look at that one because of where there is crossing right there and it connects to that trail then that goes next to that random person's driveway. Zucker's,
They've taken out that curb cut,
yeah,
because that trail that went along the creek, between the creek and that house,
Yep.
used to enter onto Cormier,
Right, and
and
now
now it doesn't.
yeah,
You get
now
the
it-
sidewalk and you go
and you
to
go
like
out.
Veterans Park and you can,
yeah, but there's still a cross there that you
Yeah,
can
there-
cross
yeah,
on
there's a-
that side.
yeah,
and
there's
that's-
a marked crosswalk.
Yeah, and that's where we said we wanted to look at that there, because there were, on one of these maps, it showed that there were 2 accidents or something there. Where's the other one that had the dots?
Okay, so that one.
And the only reason I remember it is because I saw one of them, and I was like, oh yeah, I saw one of those when they were crossing.
Pedestrian crashes is on map 5.
I shouldn't say I saw it, I got there after it had happened. But I remember being like, oh, okay. Map 5, nope, that's map 4.
It's on page 60 of the packet. At least I think that's the one you're talking about.
Pedestrian crashes, let's see. So you said Cormier.
And map 7 crashes.
Map 7.
So that one.
Yeah, that's crash hotspots. That could, maybe it's on there.
I think, is this it on 6? Bicycle, there's a bicycle crash where there's an injury, maybe that's what it was.
Oh.
6, because that looks like that, or wait, is that the right spot? No.
There's a
Nope,
minor.
that's Pilgrim up there. Yeah. If no one else remembers this, I could be crazy as well.
Yeah, map 6, it shows on it, Pilgrim and Cormier.
Yeah.
But we just talked about it last time and I had an X on mine. And maybe we don't, maybe we're good with how it is. But I just want to mention that because it's not on the possible improvements. I don't know if we wanted that on there or not.
Well, if there's a spot we have to do something with it, it doesn't have to be in the plan. for us to
No.
recommend that.
Nope. So we can leave it out.
You don't want to ask me, Jessica, for my memory. 'Cause I don't remember.
I think we talked about one, but we agreed that it wasn't necessary because
Is
there
that
was a
what
rapid flashing on Cormier.
There isn't one there though.
Yeah,
It's
I thought
up.
there was a second location on Cormier, right, that we were talking.
It's, well, you said the one by Veteran, so there,
Or we did a curb cut by that. I think it's a different cross.
okay.
Was it over by True Lane? Is that the one we were talking about?
No, it was, so the one I'm thinking of was like where Pilgrim hits Cormier, and then like if you go left, you go under the highway there.
Yep.
And there's a crossing right there, so what happens is cars are trying to turn onto Pilgrim, which is already not always great depending on the time of day. Because of the cross traffic, if someone's trying to cross there at the same time, there's a lot of, I don't want to say confusion with it, but like who has the, and how it should be. But I'll be honest, I turn on that corner all the time and I feel like just traffic flow in general at that corner can be a little depending on the time of day, especially with
Yeah, no,
trying
for
to, like,
sure.
there's times a day that I'm like, nope, I'm going up to the stoplight because it's gonna be better than trying to go there. But I think
I
that's
think you're probably, maybe you're thinking map 5. It's got reported pedestrian crashes.
yeah. But again, I mean, like you said, it doesn't have to be on this just for that. Like, I just remember us talking. And
Keep it in mind.
yeah.
So I guess then, with the changes discussed, is this good for everybody to move forward to village board?
I think this is super. There's a lot of information there.
Okay,
Yeah, we appreciate it, Devin.
sure. Yeah, so then we'll work on that and make sure that all looks good.
Ryan, maybe before we go, we can set a time to get together.
Yeah, I was looking, Devin, I think we can take your map 3, which is a functional class map.
Mhm,
I'll take that along with our capital improvement plan.
mhm.
I'll get our notes from our capital improvement plan in there.
Okay.
And then I'll chat with Rex and make sure that we have everything, so.
Okay, yeah, and then I can update it, send it back just to review it, and then that's good, I'll incorporate it, and then I assume give it to you, and then you'll get it
Yeah,
to,
I will need it by the 21st.
and I got
Supposed to have it in by 10, so let's say we're going to have it by 8, between 8 and 9.
And it should be fine.
That's why he's worried about.
All right,
I think, Mary, if we just have a quick motion recommending with the changes discussed today, I think that would be helpful, 'cause I'll make that known or noted to the board when it's presented to them.
does anybody want to make a motion to recommend the changes
I'll make a motion to recommend the changes discussed at the meeting today
and send to the board?
and send to the board.
1 second.
A motion and a second to recommend the changes and send to the board. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Good work, Kevin. Thank
No,
you.
thank you.
Okay, anything for next month's agenda? We'll wait and see what happens for that pet, bike and pet plan. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.